What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we are back to work on this thing, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on the brakes. And these brakes were kind of supposed to be a super simple thing, but they snowballed into a little bit of an ordeal, so I ended up making a whole separate video just for the brakes because this was going to be kind of a side part of the last video. But we decided to sort of split it up, and I also threw the summer tires and wheels on. As you can see, it does look a little bit lower in the front just because the car is parked at a bit of a tilt, but I absolutely love these wheels and I'm super stoked to have them on now. These are the 19-inch Volkswagen Tiguan R-Line wheels, also known as the Tiguan Savannah wheels. Love these wheels, really stoked to have them on. And now we just did the stainless brake lines, and we also did the rear pads and rotors on the car as well. Fresh rotors, as you can see. The brakes feel a lot better than they did before. I'll explain kind of why we had to go and replace everything. But yeah, the next thing that we're going to be focusing on now is those rusty doors. We got some stuff cooking up for that as well. That's how the car looks right now. Let's get into the garage and I'll show you guys what we got going on with the brakes. Well, the time has finally come to do the brakes on this thing. So I've been putting this off for a little while, but basically what happened a couple months ago is that I was in a situation where I had to brake super hard, blew the brake line on the other side of the car, on the driver's side rear. So I ended up replacing that with a rubber brake line on the other side. And this is the exact same line that I used to replace the broken line. Now, if one line breaks, chances are the other one is gonna break. So I figured, you know what? I'm probably gonna upgrade the lines to something stainless. So I didn't end up putting this line on to this side because I wanted to upgrade to stainless lines. So basically what we have now is a set of stainless lines. So we're gonna be replacing the pads, rotors, and the lines on the rear of the car. And then we're also going to be replacing the front brake lines with stainless lines as well. Now, the front already has relatively new pads and rotors on there, so we're not going to worry about the pads and rotors on the front. We're just going to be doing it on the rear. Here we have all the parts that we're going to need to do brake refresh. First thing we have, so starting on the left here, we have an old water bottle to catch our brake fluid when we're going to be flushing it out. We have a hose here to catch the fluid from the bleeders and put it into the bottle. So we're going to make a little catch bottle for that. We've got some Sonax wheel cleaner to clean the wheels once we're done. For the rear, we've got a pair of rotors. And then again, the front rotors are still relatively new, so we're not going to worry about that. Some Raybestos Element 3 pads as well for the rear. And then here we have our new stainless brake lines. So these are a set of StopTech lines. This is the rear one with the banjo. And of course, they come with the hardware needed as well. We will be putting these ones on the rear and then pads and rotors. And then eventually we're going to move to the front and put these onto the front. I also grabbed a set of bleeder screws just in case. And then we have our .4 brake fluid. So I just use the Canadian Tire stuff. It's rated for VW Audi. Not too worried. I also started using the Canadian Tire coolant, which is also like the pink coolant for VW Audi, and I have not had an issue with that. We're gonna try this fluid out. Probably should use Liquimoly or a more legit brand, but you know what? We're gonna try out Canadian Tire .4 fluid, which is pretty inexpensive compared to your European name brands. Another thing we have here for tools now, what's called the Motive Power Bleeder. So this allows you to bleed your brakes without another person, which is super handy. What it does is it pressurizes the system with this pump, and then this end here, so these connect together, and then this end goes to the top of the brake fluid reservoir. And this is the black label version, which comes with the billet piece here, which is super nice. And this one also swivels so that it doesn't twist up the hose while you're tightening it onto the reservoir. So that's an improvement from the previous Motive bleeder. So this is the new black label version with the billet piece. This is a really nice tool to have. And if you do ever want to use one of these or you want to buy one, there's a really good video from FCP Euro that I actually just watched before doing this. So I'll link a video in the description for a DIY on how to use this. Super handy tool. I've used it once or twice before and I do recommend them. Saves you a lot of time and effort. Allows you to do with just one person. Here we have our caliper compression tool. I'm not sure if we're gonna need that. I also have this and a C-clamp, which is what I always used to use, but I lost mine and so I have to get a new one, which I may have to modify to work with these calipers, but we will see when we get to that. Lastly, have our flare nut wrenches, which I think we only need one of those. That should be everything we need to replace our rear pads and rotors and put some new stainless lines all around. Big shout out to Calgary Auto Works for getting me these brake lines super fast, including this. Colin at Calgary Auto Works actually hand delivered me these brake lines to the garage here when I was stuck without brakes. So thank you so much, Colin, for that. And thank you again for getting me the brake lines. And shout out to Innovative Autoworks for the pads and rotors and all the other parts as usual. With that, let's get these parts installed, shall we? Check out what the Canadian winter does to these cars. I mean, my bad for not cleaning, but we're gonna have to get in here and do a little bit of cleaning. So this flare nut right here is super rusted and it's definitely stuck on there, as you can see. So I've already started even rounding out that nut there. So this is gonna be a pain in the ass. So what we're gonna do, try and hit it with some heat and see if we can get that to free up. It seems like heat is the only option in these types of situations. So let's try that. Hell no. Yeah, this thing does not want to come off. Or one of these two, hopefully, will get it off. No. All right, good news. So after fiddling around with it a little bit and compressing the hell out of it with a vice grip, I managed to get it loose, but unfortunately I did crush that lock nut. I mean, I would like to replace it, but I don't have a flare nut tool right now. Everything else came loose. This end of the line came loose pretty easily, so we can pull that off. And then the brake caliper bolts came off pretty easily. So I'm gonna start pulling it apart. I'm gonna put it back together with this flare nut. Not ideal, but at least the stainless lines will be on, and then that way I can come back later and pull this back, flare it. So as you see, I had to sort of drill out this screw here. I did get the rotor off and then I kind of wanted to drill it out the rest of the way, but I effed up and kind of drilled it a little too big. So I kind of messed the threads up. I mean, there's no threads left at all. So I think I'm just gonna put the rotor on and bolt the wheel on and it'll be fine without that screw. We don't need that. And then as I was about to put the new rotor on, I realized that it's the slightly larger one, which is actually a good thing. So you can see right there, it's lined up, and on this side, it's probably like 10 millimeters. I think it's a 2, I'm not gonna even say it because I don't even know them, which ones are which. Maybe I'll put it on the screen, the sizes of each one, but they both work with the factory caliper. I believe the larger one just came on like different model years, or maybe the higher models. I'm not sure, like the 3.0 might have came with this rotor. And this car's a 1.8T, but that screw hole that I just drilled out, there's no place to actually mount a screw anyways, because it wouldn't hold anything, so we won't need that anyway. So I got a little carried away and ended up finishing a bunch of stuff, but I also didn't do the rotors or pads because I found that the carrier was actually seized to the knuckle, and so I could not get that off, and so I tried a bunch of different things. We're gonna have to figure that out later. So I ended up putting the old rotors back on, but I did get see it there, the stainless line is installed, and I did bleed both the rears as well with the Motive bleeder. So that all went pretty smooth. They look pretty good. And so now I'm going to move on to the front. We are good. This fits now on the brake line. I didn't have an 11 millimeter line wrench, so I ended up taking an existing 11 millimeter wrench that I had and just cutting a gap into it so that I can get it onto the brake line. Now it's just barely big enough to fit, and I'm just going to file it down just to make it a bit smoother. Almost like it was meant to be that way. Okay, well, I have the front apart here, and I just put heat on that nut, and it will that flare nut will not come off. Kept hitting it with heat and PB blaster and no luck, and it's just starting to round out. And then this side too, I haven't really tried too hard on that one, but I know it's just going to be the same thing as this side. So at this point, I'm pretty sure I just want to cut it off right on the hard lines and put brand new flare nuts on there. So before I round off that flare nut, I think I'm gonna stop here. It is like midnight now, so I should probably wrap it up for the night. Otherwise I'll end up staying up all night fighting it. And then we'll go from there. But I got the rear lines done, I guess. Front lines will have to wait until I can either get a flare nut tool or another solution to that. But yeah, overall failure of a job. Alrighty, so we're back here now, and I just went in and retried all these bolts. I did soak this side in PB Blaster last time, and so now I just decided to hit it again with the vice grip. So I did kind of put a wrench on it. I don't have a proper line wrench, as you might have saw. I cut a hole in this one to kind of make a line wrench, but it kind of defeats the purpose because it's a 12 point and you need a 6 point for this, so it doesn't strip that. So this didn't really work, unsurprisingly, and so I just went straight to the vice grips, and I just tried to grip it such that I didn't like actually gouge the nut too badly. So I managed to get them all loose with the vice grips. So I'm gonna go now and change out the lines, and then we will bleed those with the motive bleeder. So I did the rear already. It is bled. I might need to bleed it again because I think it could be a little bit better, but I'm gonna do the front, and then if we need to re-bleed the rear, then we will go back to the rear and then start the whole bleed process again, reflush it and make sure there's absolutely no air in there at all. So let's get to it, and we'll flip this line here for a stainless one. Got the stainless steel brake lines all installed, and luckily I managed not to mangle the bolts completely, or the nuts there, and they came off reasonably smooth. This one is a little bit mangled. On the other side, a little bit more mangled. As you can see, kind of messed up the nut a little bit, but we got her undone. That one is not too bad. So we got both of the lines done. Now we're gonna go ahead and bleed the system. So we're gonna be using this motive power bleeder. So what this does is you have brake fluid inside here, and it pressurizes with this pump and applies pressure into the brake system. So this cap will screw on here, put pressure in the system, and then we can then bleed the brakes by opening the bleeder screws and draining into this. So I just drilled a hole here for the hose to go in, and that goes to the bottom, and then another hole here just for the air to escape. And then that will allow us to bleed the fluid out from the calipers. So I already did the rear of the car, and I flushed pretty much like 1.5 quarts through the rear almost, and it still felt like there's a little bit of air in the system. I'm not sure, so I'm gonna bleed the front, see how it feels, and then if we need to go back and bleed the rear again, then we'll do that. But I do have another quart here of some fresh fluid, so we're gonna put that into the bleeder. And so we're gonna start on the passenger side of the car because it's furthest away from the master cylinder on the front. We already did the rear. Put this hose on the bleeder, and then I have another bottle here to switch out as soon as it gets to the top. So again, I'll leave a link in the description of how-to video on how to use this bleeder. It's by FCP Euro. It's a great video. This is a really awesome product. So if you ever need to bleed your brakes by yourself, this thing's wicked. I got this from Amazon. Okay, so we bled the brakes on the car and everything looks and feels great now. So the only thing left to do is the rear brake rotors and pads. So what I decided is that I'm going to stick with the original caliper carriers, because on the back of the car here, the caliper carrier bolts are pretty seized back there. So just to get the new rotors on as soon as possible, I decided to actually just go back to the 245 millimeter brake rotors, because I made the mistake and thought that the 255 millimeter rotors would work with the existing caliper carriers, which is not the case. So I would need to track down a set of 255 millimeter caliper carriers to run those. So for now, I just ended up ordering a set of 245 millimeter brake rotors. So over here, we have a fresh pair of Zimmerman 245 millimeter brake rotors. So big shout out to Concept One for getting me these rotors like within I don't know, a couple hours, and getting them to me for a really great price as well. I have them lined up here, so they're flat on this side, and right here you can see kind of the difference between the 245 and the 255 mil. It's a very minimal difference, but it's just enough that this rotor isn't able to work with the existing caliper carrier, which I thought that amount of difference would be allowable in that carrier, but I was wrong. Over here we have our Raybestos Element 3 brake pads. So we're going to be running the EHT Element 3 pads. It's the same pads I have in the rear on the Mark II Jetta PR6, and I have had no issues with those. And then I also grabbed some new caliper carrier bolts, even though I wasn't able to get them out. So I do have them here for when time comes to get those out. I'm probably gonna have to like oxy torch them or weld a nut or both and somehow find a way to get that out. And then I have my brake lube here to lube up the slider pins and get everything kind of refreshed. And then I'm also gonna hit those with the wire wheel to just clean them up a little bit. And then because right now they're a little bit gummed up, so we wanna get those all freed up so that we have maximum braking performance in the rear of the car. So with that, let's get these brake pads and rotors on, and we will be done and dusted with the brakes, and then we can move on to some more fun things. Another difference to note is that this 245 millimeter rotor is actually about, it's supposed to be 10 mil, and I measured it to about 9.8 at its lowest amount. Oh yeah, it's like 10 exactly almost. And then the other ones I measured to about 12.2 mil. So they're a little bit thicker, which I noticed did make it a little bit more difficult to squeeze in. We're gonna just go with this rotor, and that should solve our issue. Got the slider pins all cleaned and lubed up and ready to go. Make this one a little less boring for you guys. Okay, so we got fresh rotors all installed. Looks super fresh. So we got that done. We got the brake lines done all around. We got the fluid all bled and flushed with fresh brake fluid. And then we also got the rear caliper pins all lubed up and free because one of them was stuck pretty solidly in there and I had to get it out with like vice grips. And so I kind of wire wheeled that and cleaned that up. And you can see here too is that on one side, the pad here is completely gone on one side, and then on the other side the pads are still in decent condition. So I think this was the side that had like the stuck caliper pin, and then this is the side that was a little more freed up, so it's getting more pressure on that one for sure. And then the fluid, cleaned that up, so some nasty shit came out of there, so that's good. And then we have all fresh fluid in there, so I put about 1.5 liters through the system, all of that, so we should have all fresh fluid in there. We're gonna take it for a drive, see how it feels. Getting those rotors being nicely scrubbed, and I barely touched the brake pedal. Got a bit of scrubbing, so we're good there. And also right there, I think those calipers were pretty seized up before. Well guys, thanks so much for watching. That's going to do it for today's video, but we're going to be doing some more work on this car here soon. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more content on this, and also something hiding in the back there that we need to get working on soon. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if there's anything specific that you want to see, and I will do my best to make that happen. Again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.